You lost yards off the tee last summer. Not because of your age, not because of your swing speed. It happened in the 2 seconds before you ever moved the club. Here's what I found. Almost every weekend, golfer sets up to the driver the exact same way they set up to a 7-iron. Ball centered, hands pressed forward, weight leaning toward the target. And that one habit, that quiet little stance you never think about, is teaching you to hit down on the one club on earth that was built to be hit up. I didn't believe it either. Not until I filmed my own swing at a municipal range outside town and saw the numbers with my own eyes. The trail started with an old paperback I almost threw away, a book printed in 1942 with a single underlined sentence a stranger left behind decades ago. That sentence is the whole case. And by the end of this, I'll hand you the 5-second fix I traced all the way back to it, one you can do standing in your living room tonight with a club you already own. Let me take you back to how this started, because the beginning is where I got everything wrong. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the range was empty except for one man. He had to be 75 years old. Thin arms. A slow, almost lazy backswing. Nothing about him said power. And he was flushing drives past a marker that I could not reach on my best day. I had 30 years on him. I had a driver that cost me more than $400. And he was out hitting me with a scarred old club that looked older than my car. I did what any stubborn person would do. I hit harder, I swung faster, the ball went shorter, and that's the first clue I want you to sit with, because it makes no sense, and it took me months to understand it. Swinging harder was making the ball travel a shorter distance. That's not supposed to be possible, but it was happening on every single swing, and it had nothing to do with how strong I was. So I asked him. He didn't give me a lecture. He just pointed at my feet and said, "You're set up to hit down. That club wants to go up." Then he packed his bag and left. I never saw him again. But that sentence rattled around in my head for weeks, because I had no idea what it meant. I thought you hit down on the ball. Every instinct I had, every lesson I half remembered, told me to hit down and through, trap it, compress it. That's what good players do. Therefore, I did the only thing I know how to do when something doesn't add up. I started digging, and the first place I went was the launch monitor, because I wanted numbers, not opinions. What I learned there cracked the whole thing open. There's a measurement the machines call attack angle. It's simply whether the club head is moving slightly downward or slightly upward at the moment it meets the ball. And when they measured thousands of everyday golfers, the average amateur was swinging down at the ball with the driver at an angle of about negative 1.7 degrees. The club was descending, chopping down just a little on every drive. Then they measured the long hitters, the people who launch it into the next area code. Those players were doing the opposite. Their clubs were moving upward at impact, +3, +5. Some of the long drive specialists as high as +7 degrees. They were hitting up on the ball. Here's the part that stopped me cold. The launch data showed that a golfer swinging the club at around 90 miles an hour, an ordinary speed, an honest speed, could add roughly 20 to 30 yards to a drive without swinging one bit faster. Same effort, same body, same speed. Just by changing whether the club was moving down or up at the moment it touched the ball. 20 to 30 yards. For free. Sitting in a stance adjustment that takes less time than reading this sentence. I sat in my truck in that parking lot and did the math on what that meant. Every drive I'd hit for years, I'd been leaving a first down of distance on the ground. Not because I was weak, because I was set up backwards. And that's when the first small clue snapped into place and a much bigger question cracked open underneath it. If this is measurable, if the machines prove it, if it costs nothing to fix, then why in the world did nobody ever teach it to me? Why did I have to learn it from a stranger who walked away? Because someone benefited from me not knowing. And that's where the trail got dark. Let me tell you what I found when I asked how the hit down on everything idea took over. Because it did take over. Walk onto almost any range in America and you'll hear the same words drifting from every stall. Hit down on it, Cover the ball, get your weight forward, and for your irons, that advice is fine. It's correct, even. But somewhere along the way, that one instruction got stamped onto every club in the bag, including the one club it ruins. Think about who wins when you believe your problem is the club. When you're set up backwards, hitting down, losing 30 yards, you don't blame your stance, you blame your equipment. So you go buy a new driver. Then another one next year, promising you 10 more yards. The whole business runs on the belief that the distance is missing from your wallet when it was actually missing from your setup the entire time. I have 3 old drivers in my garage that prove it. 3. Each one bought to fix a problem no driver on earth could fix, because the problem was standing behind the ball, not sitting on the tee. But here's what really got under my skin. The fix used to be common knowledge. Ordinary golfers knew it. Old caddies taught it to schoolboys, and then, over a few decades, it just quietly vanished from the conversation. It didn't get banned. It got buried under a mountain of new gadgets and new lessons and new theories that all needed you to keep paying. Free knowledge doesn't sell. A $20 bill's worth of understanding that you keep forever is terrible for business. A $400 driver you replace every 2 seasons is wonderful for it. Therefore, I wanted proof that the old way was real, that I wasn't romanticizing some stranger at a range. So I went looking for the underlined sentence. I went back to the book. The book was a worn paperback I'd picked up in a box of estate sale junk for almost nothing, $1, maybe less. It was called Unlearning Golf, written by a man named Percy Boomer, first published in 1942. Boomer wasn't some modern marketing invention. He taught golf in Europe between the 2 world wars, at a club in France, to kings and champions and ordinary hackers alike. And the previous owner of my copy had underlined one line in soft pencil so long ago the mark had almost faded into the page. Boomer wrote about the feeling of the club sweeping the ball away, of the body tilting slightly back so the swing bottomed out before the ball and rose into it. He described, in 1942, in plain words, the exact positive attack angle those million-dollar machines confirmed decades later. He didn't have a launch monitor. He had eyes and hands and a lifetime of watching what worked. And he knew that the driver was different, that it sat on a tee for a reason, that you were meant to catch it on the way up. That underlined pencil line was somebody generations before me having the same realization I was having in a truck in a parking lot. Somebody read that sentence, felt it click, and marked it so they'd never forget. Then the book got boxed up, sold for pocket change, and the knowledge sat in the dark waiting for the next person to trip over it, me. But one old book could be a fluke. One clever teacher between the wars doesn't prove a lost tradition. I needed to know if this went deeper, if the greatest players who ever lived also knew the thing I was never told. So I kept pulling the thread, and the thread led straight to the men whose names are carved into the game. Here's the clue that pulled me forward. If hitting up on the driver was a real, known principle, then the legends should show it, not just say it. So I went and studied how the old champions actually stood to the ball, and what I found was hiding in plain sight in photographs that are almost 100 years old. Bobby Jones, the greatest amateur who ever played, won everything there was to win by 1930. Look at how he addressed a driver. The ball sat forward off the inside of his lead foot, nowhere near the center of his stance. His head sat clearly behind the ball. His whole spine tilted a touch away from the target. He wasn't stacked over the top of it like a man chopping wood. He was set up to sweep it, to rise into it, to catch it on the upswing exactly the way Percy Boomer described. Then I went to Ben Hogan, a man famous for grinding out the most precise, most studied swing in history. His book, 5 Lessons, came out in 1957, and it's still one of the best-selling golf instruction books ever printed. Hogan was demanding about ball position. And where did he put the driver? Forward, off the left heel, the furthest forward position of any club in the bag. Not because he was careless, but because he understood that the longest club, sitting on a tee, needed to be met as the club head swept upward through the bottom of the arc and started to climb. Every one of these men, across different eras, with different bodies and different swings, agreed on the setup. Ball forward, head behind it, a slight tilt away from the target, and a strike that rose into the bowl instead of chopping down on it. This wasn't one eccentric teacher's theory. This was the shared, quiet foundation of the people who played the game best before the whole thing got paved over. 3 drivers in a garage. That's the price of never being told the truth, of blaming the club when the real leak was your setup the whole time. If you want every one of those leaks found and closed for good, that's exactly what the Complete Golf Fix system does. It hands you the setup adjustments tour players use that amateurs never hear, the 15-second grip audit that changes your ball flight right away, and a way to diagnose exactly where your shots are bleeding strokes. It's the same idea you're watching now, just laid out completely and permanently, so you stop guessing and start knowing. Here's a check you can run tonight in your living room for free with a club you already own. Set your feet, lay a broom handle on the floor pointing at your lead heel, and see how far forward your driver actually wants to sit. Most people are stunned, and that's proof this stuff is real before you spend a dime. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And this isn't a fashion that fades. Your fundamentals are what's costing you strokes every single round you play right now, whether you fix them or not. But one old book could be a fluke, and I wasn't ready to bet everything on a stranger at a range. So let me show you what happened when I dug deeper. So now the clue snapped fully into place, and I could finally see the shape of what had happened. The old masters knew. They set up to hit up. Then somewhere in the rush of modern equipment and modern lessons, the driver got lumped in with every other club, and a couple of generations of golfers, including me, got quietly taught to do the one thing that cost the most distance. I finally understood the crime, but understanding it didn't fix my swing. And this is the exact moment I know some of you are thinking this isn't for you. You can't take weekly lessons. You can't rebuild a swing you've owned for 40 years. You've got a bad knee, a stiff back, a slice you've made peace with, and no interest in becoming a project. I hear that because that was me, standing there with 3 useless drivers in the garage, sure that all this history was fascinating and none of it was going to help an ordinary player like me. So let me show you the part that changed my mind, because you don't need a new swing, a new body, or a single dollar. You need 5 seconds and the club you already own. This is the fix I promised you, and I want to walk you through it exactly the way I finally got it to work, standing in my own driveway. The first piece is the tee. Before you touch your stance, look at how high you tee the ball. Most people tee it far too low, so the whole ball sits down near the ground, which practically forces you to hit down to reach it. Here's the old rule I dug up, and it's beautifully simple. Tee it so that when you rest the driver head on the ground behind the ball, the very top edge of the club head cuts the ball across its middle, half the ball above the crown of the driver, half below. That one change alone gives you permission to catch it on the way up, because now the ball is waiting for you at the top of the arc instead of down in the dirt. It costs nothing. You already own tees. The second piece is ball position, and this is where the word backwards in all this really lives. Stop putting the driver in the center of your stance. Move it forward until it sits just inside your lead heel. That's Hogan's spot. That's Jones's spot. That's the spot that lets the club head reach the low point of its arc behind the ball and then start climbing as it meets it. You can check this at home with no ball at all. Set your feet, lay a club or even a broom handle on the floor pointing at your lead heel, and see where the driver naturally wants to sit. Almost everyone is shocked at how far forward it belongs. The third piece is the one nobody shows you, and it's the difference maker. It's the tilt. Once the ball is forward, let your trail shoulder, the one farther from the target, drop down slightly. Not a lurch. Not a lean back that falls off balance. Just a soft settling of that back shoulder so your spine tips a hair away from the target and your head sits behind the ball. When you do this, you'll feel your lead shoulder rise a touch and your trail hip settle. That's the feeling Percy Boomer wrote about in 1942. That's the reverse tilt the old champions built into every driver's setup, and it takes about 1 second to set. Put those three together, tee it so half the ball clears the crown, play it off your lead heel, and drop the trail shoulder, and you have physically made it almost impossible to chop down on the ball. You've turned your own body into a machine that hits up. No lesson, no new club, no gym, just a stance you set before you ever swing. I practiced it in my driveway for a week with no ball, just feeling the positions in the reflection of the garage window. Feet set, ball spot forward, tee it in my mind, drop the back shoulder, freeze. 5 seconds, over and over, until my body stopped fighting it. Then I took it to the range. And the first honest strike I made with that setup came off the face with a sound I had never made before. Higher, lighter, off the club face, and it just kept going. It floated past the marker that old man had reached, the one I'd never touched. I stood there like a fool, grinning at an empty range. But here's the thing that nagged at me, even in that moment of victory. Getting the setup right was only most of the answer. I could feel there was one last piece, one final adjustment that separated a decent drive from the towering running bombs those long hitters produce. The setup got the club moving up. Something else was aiming that upward strike perfectly. And I didn't find it in Boomer, and I didn't find it in Hogan. I found it buried in the launch data in a set of numbers that at first looked like a mistake. Here's the last clue, and it's the one that ties the whole case together. When I studied the optimal launch conditions the tracking systems publish, the numbers seemed impossible at first glance. For an ordinary swing speed, somewhere around 90 miles an hour, the machine said the ideal launch angle for maximum distance was surprisingly high, up around 14 or 15 degrees into the air. But here's the twist that made no sense to me. The standard driver they hand you off the rack is often built with only 9 or 10.5 degrees of loft. The math didn't work. How do you launch the ball at 14 or 15 degrees with a club that only has 10 degrees of loft? The answer is the secret finale, and it's the piece almost nobody puts together. You launch it higher than the loft of the club by hitting up on it. The upward attack angle you built with that setup literally adds effective loft at impact. If you catch the ball with the club head moving upward at, say, 5 degrees, you add roughly that much launch to the club's built-in loft. That's how a 10-degree driver sends the ball up at 15 degrees. The launch angle you need is manufactured by the direction of the strike, not by the number stamped on the sole. And there's a bonus hidden inside it, the part that finally explained why the old man's slow, lazy swing crushed my fast, violent one. When you hit up on the ball, you don't just launch it higher. You launch it with less backspin. Hitting down on a driver does the opposite. It jacks the spin up, and too much spin makes the ball climb, stall, and drop out of the sky like a wounded bird. That's exactly what my hard swings were doing. All that speed, all that effort, spinning the ball into a steep, short balloon. The old man's sweeping, upward strike produced a lower spinning ball that launched high, held its line, and ran forever when it landed. He wasn't stronger than me. He was smarter than me by about 70 years. I finally chased the numbers to the source that put it beyond doubt. The company that built the radar tracking systems used by nearly every touring professional publishes what they call their optimizer, the tested relationship between swing speed, attack angle, launch, and spin. And it confirmed every single thing that Stranger told me in a sentence, that Boomer underlined in 1942, that Jones and Hogan built into their stances. Hit up on the driver. Launch it high. Spin it low. The most modern measurement technology in the entire game exists, in the end, to prove what the old masters already knew and what somebody scrubbed out of the ordinary golfer's education. So here's the whole trail. laid out in order, the way I wish someone had handed it to me years and 3 wasted drivers ago. The knowledge existed. Percy Boomer wrote it plainly in 1942. Bobby Jones and Ben Hogan built it into the way they stood to the ball. Then it got buried under new equipment and new lessons that all needed you to keep paying until an ordinary player like me had never once heard it. A stranger at an empty range kept it alive long enough to point at my feet and say 7 words. I traced those 7 words back through a dollar paperback, through 100-year-old photographs, all the way to a launch monitor readout that proved every bit of it. And now you're holding the finished trail. This weekend, before you swing, do the 5-second version. Tee it so half the ball clears the top of the driver. Play it off your lead heel. Drop your back shoulder a hair so your head sits behind the ball. Then sweep up into it and let it climb. You will not swing 1 mile an hour faster, and you will watch the ball go somewhere it has never gone for you before. What I really recovered out there wasn't 20 yards. It was the quiet insult of it, the fact that the distance was mine the whole time, sitting 1 stance adjustment away, kept from me by people who'd rather sell me a new club than tell me the truth for free. Getting it back felt like taking back something that had been picked from my pocket for years. If you're the kind of person who'd rather understand the whole trail than swallow a headline, who wants to know why a thing works and where it came from before you trust it, then you already think the way this channel thinks. So tell me one thing down in the comments, and be specific because I read them and I chase the good ones. Which of the 3 did you get wrong? The tee height, the ball position, or the shoulder tilt? Type it out. I want to know which piece was the one nobody ever showed you, because I'll bet money it's the tilt. Subscribe and stand with the rest of us who are quietly digging up the practical knowledge that got paved over and sold back to us in pieces. We're putting the free version back in people's hands, one buried method at a time. Next, I'm chasing down something even stranger. The reason your grandfather could hit a low, boring wind shot into a gale that never gets taught anymore, and the single change to your hands that brings it back. I found the thread in an old caddy's notebook, and I think it's going to surprise you even more than this one did. Before you go, let me tell you where this leads. Inside the Practical Wisdom Circle, I walk you through the full driver setup, step by step. And if something doesn't click, you ask me directly, and I answer you myself. No robots. You won't be doing it alone either. Folks like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime with 1 click. Come join me. Now that your setup is right, there's one simple move that stops those slices and adds real distance off the tee. I'll walk you through it, nice and easy. It's starting right here.